Okay. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into a live edition of the Wishbone ShotGun podcast on the Sports Insanity Network. College football conference championship game edition. I'm Mike Griffin, joined by Adam Reeder. Adam, it's one of our favorite Saturdays of the year, conference championship day.
Yep, pray for Alabama to slide out of the 4 seed day, but I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen, but
we'll talk about the heavyweight fight in the SEC, Georgia and Alabama, in a few minutes. We'll talk scenarios also for the playoffs. So the playoffs, the first 4 teams for the playoffs that were announced Tuesday night were Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Cincinnati. All 4 of those teams play today. It's simple for those 4. Win and you're in, more likely than not. And the only team who will suffer a loss and still get in is Georgia. I think where everyone's in agreement.
Right, 100%.
Okay, so let's start with the game that will start first. They'll start in about 50 minutes or so. Oklahoma State, who is 5th in that college football playoff ranking that was released Tuesday, takes on Baylor, who I believe is 9th in that college football playoff ranking. This is the Big 12 title game. Baylor's 10-2, Oklahoma State's 11-1. These 2 teams actually played in October, with Oklahoma State defeating Baylor 24-14. So I think Baylor's one of the interesting teams, because if all these teams, depending on who falters, if Baylor wins this game, all of a sudden, maybe they could jump a Notre Dame and whoever to get in. Adam, your thoughts, Oklahoma State, Baylor?
I mean, I like Oklahoma State after last week, especially after them beating Oklahoma. I don't think I can pick against them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I haven't been that impressed with Baylor's quarterback the last time I watched them, but both teams are solid. I mean, both teams could clearly win this, and it's. I think I would really just say I would think Oklahoma State would win because we expected Oklahoma to be in this and not them. Most of us. So I'll give it to them, but expect a high scoring game like these teams usually have.
Just to go back to that October 2nd game, Spencer Sanders, the Oklahoma State quarterback, a touchdown, 3 picks, and they still found a way to win. Joseph Warren, the running back, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. This was a stat that really caught my eye in that October 2nd game. Baylor on 3rd downs was 3 of 15. Oklahoma State was 8 of 19. You want to win this game if you're Baylor, you've got to find a way to keep your offense on the field. Oklahoma State's got a great defense. I like Oklahoma State also, but I also like them because of Mike Gundy's hair. If you haven't seen it, it's beautiful.
So you haven't seen it, you've never watched one of their games ever because you would have noticed it.
I mean, Brandon Weeden watches every Oklahoma State Cowboy game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got Brandon Weeden, Justin Blackman. Yeah, that was the crew.
And Dez.
Oklahoma State legend. So
now that I'm thinking, did Dez play with Brandon Weeden?
I don't know.
Isn't that a weird combination to think of, that they could have been together?
That is a very weird combination to think about. But that's the Big 12 title game. So we also have the ACC title game. Now that'll be the late game, and neither one of these 2 teams have playoff implications, really, Wake Forest or Pitt. Not a knock on them. It's just neither one's going to the playoffs. But that should be a fun game. Kenny Pickett, who's turned himself, I think I heard Mel Kiper say he might be his favorite quarterback in this draft. But
I think he's been definitely growing on me too, and I've started to agree with that because the other ones we've been waiting for him to step up, and I don't know, they've all been sort of underwhelming. But I mean, not to say that I think Pickett's going to be a high pick. It's just, oh, I think this is a weak class, like everybody is saying.
Yeah, it's a really interesting quarterback class when you look at it. You have Matt Corral, the kid at Ole Miss. I like Sam Howell from North Carolina, but I don't know if he's ready right away. He might need a year or so to really figure some things out.
I'm getting like Will Greer vibes from him. And like, I really, really liked Will Greer coming out of college, and he did not work. So
dude, Will Greer is still somewhere.
But he was just like the guy that like you like, oh, this is like the dark horse for the Heisman race the whole year. And then like in the pros, he's a fourth round pick and he's awful. Yeah. I don't know.
All right. Do you like Wake or Pitt?
Pitt.
All right. I actually like Wake Forest. This should be a fun game.
Yeah.
Two explosive teams. Wake is third in the country in points per game. Pitt is fourth. I think this game comes down to turnovers like they usually do. Wake is sixth in the country in turnover margin. So I think that's where the difference is, but this should be fun. Okay, so let's go to the Cinderella, and that would be Cincinnati, because Cincinnati they are the one team I don't think the committee wants to put in, just because they're not a major school. They don't come from a Power 5. They just go out and do their business. So before we get into their game against Houston, if they lose, Adam, are Cincinnati done?
I would think so, just because of what you said. Like they've been. It's not like that they have really something against them. It's just they don't trust the fact that they're from a smaller conference and all this stuff. So like, if they lose, that's going to be the reason to boot them out. And one of these teams on the fringe, one of these teams that are from 5 to 7 are going to win this weekend, and they're going to have an argument to get in. And if Cincinnati, I almost think if Cincinnati loses and Alabama lose, they would keep Alabama and boot Cincinnati.
I could totally see that happening, right? Also. Well, here's the other thing about that is, if Cincinnati loses, if Alabama loses, if Michigan loses, which we'll get to that game late in a few minutes, does then Ohio State maybe make a run back in?
Maybe, and maybe Notre Dame does.
See that one bothers me, and this is not a knock on Notre Dame. This is an anti-Notre Dame, but it's Cincinnati went into Notre Dame and beat them, and that's Notre Dame's only loss on the year, I believe.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between Cincinnati losing in a conference title game, one loss to Notre Dame, when Cincinnati actually went into Notre Dame and beat them? But what's the formula of picking Notre Dame?
That's kind of why what you just said is the issue with the committee and all this stuff versus just standings and playoffs.
Yeah.
Because it's everything goes with a hot hand. So if you lose right before the big dance, you don't get to show up.
You're not allowed to go to the dance without a date.
Right.
And look, I think Cincinnati's proven a lot over this year, and there have been weeks where they don't win pretty, and all the experts will say, oh, they're good, but they don't blow teams out. But a mark of a good team is not always winning in blowouts. It's finding ways to win. And so I just wonder what the committee takes into account. Now, obviously, they have to play the game before anything gets divulged. I think the 4 teams in the playoff will be revealed. I think it's tomorrow. But I have a hard time if Cincinnati loses, they're not gonna get there, which is sad. That's why I'm rooting very hard for Cincinnati. Yeah. Just to show up and say, hey, we don't have the luxury of being SEC, Big Ten, ACC. We don't care. We're here to crash the pot. We're wedding crashers. That's who we are. We are Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson from Wedding Crashers. That is who we are.
Yep.
So, I mean, just some numbers going into the Cincinnati game against the Houston Cougars. Cincinnati is third in the nation in red zone defense. Houston's 20th. Cincinnati's third in scoring defense. Houston 19th. Cincinnati 8th in the country in scoring offense. Houston 10th. So this should be a fun game. Houston's 4th in the country in turnover margin. Cincinnati's 9th. So this is not going to be easy for Cincinnati, but this could be a very fun game as well. I think the line is Cincy minus 10.5. But
seems
I mean, that's a tough line for a team who's only lost one game if you're Houston.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, no one's even paying attention to Houston, but it's like Cincinnati has won bigger games and undefeated and
all the pressure's on Cincinnati.
Yeah.
All the pressure. And I like Desmond Ridder, the quarterback out of Cincinnati at Cincinnati. So
am I overstepping to say that this game is just big for college football for the just like the aura of like why UCF wasn't allowed in, and now since like you know what I mean? Like
I think deep down, I think if you're a true college football fan, you're rooting for Cincinnati in this game.
100%.
If you're the NCAA and the playoff committee, you're rooting for Houston.
Yeah. Yeah, because
they are rooting for. Go ahead.
No. I'm just gonna say they are rooting for Houston because it is their like that their argument is that the other conferences aren't strong enough to.
And this is kind of my problem, not with conferences. I get conferences, but this is my problem with how certain schedules are made. And I know we'll talk about Alabama in a few minutes, and we'll get to the Alabama-Georgia game, which should be intense. But I get Alabama plays an SEC schedule, but then they play teams like New Mexico State and the Citadel in the middle of the season. And because we're supposed to get excited when they beat those teams 63-10 or whatever it is.
They don't play really hard teams outside of the SEC very often, and that's not saying that. I mean, the SEC is the toughest task you can have, but then again, I don't know. I guess you just don't notice it as much when I don't know. Every team has cakewalks on their schedule, or teams that should be cakewalks, but it looks a little goofy when it's literally Alabama because it's an NFL team versus a D2 team.
Right. And if you look at Alabama, if you just watch some Alabama games, because they're always on TV, they struggled with a Florida team that's not very good. Mm-hmm. LSU gave them fits, and they're not very good, especially now with Brian Kelly's Southern accent. I don't know if you saw the video. Brian Kelly at the LSU basketball game the other night tried to fake a Southern accent. It was not good.
I saw him walking around and I thought he looked funny in the purple, but no, I did not hear the accent.
And last week, Alabama struggled with an Auburn team that's without Bo Nix. So my thing is this. What's the difference between them playing bad against these bad teams? I know they win, and Cincinnati winning ugly against bad teams. The difference is Cincinnati's not in the SEC. And I think this is the divide between the fans and the NCAA. We love these stories of teams like Cincinnati and UCF of a couple of years ago. The NCAA sees it as dollar signs and ratings.
Which isn't that actually kind of weird to think about because like how March Madness is completely driven off of these rando Loyolas.
Yeah. And that's my thing is we have March Madness, which we love. But I think this just signifies the need of playoff expansion, which I know they've talked about going over for the next couple of years. But sooner rather than later, playoff expansion is going to happen because you're penalizing a team like Cincinnati who could lose to a really good Houston team. And
Well, like-
you're going to penalize them by losing this one game, and they're not going to get into the playoff if they lose.
Mhm.
But if they win, you're going to try as hard as you can to keep them out, but you can't. Because I guarantee you someone in that room when they're doing this, even if Cincinnati wins on a last-second field goal, there's someone in that room who's going to say, I don't know if I put them in. They struggled. It's just not how this should work.
Yeah. It's just four is so cutthroat for like the number of teams to let in with all the conferences they have with I mean, nobody, the problem is with college basketball, every team plays 30 games. You can play any 30 games. You can play any 30 teams. There's 250 college teams. So they let 64 in. Actually, they let even more than that because they have qualifying rounds and stuff like that.
68, you have the two play-ins.
So like everyone has a chance to prove themselves. Everyone has a chance to beat somebody good at some point during the season. And that doesn't always happen for college football because like you're talking about Houston or like whatever, when UCF was good, like UCF, they never got a chance at Alabama. They never got a chance at some of these big schools to vault them up into the top four.
Right. So this is Cincinnati, and I'll get to Houston in a second. All right, they beat Miami, Ohio. All right, Murray State. All right, but then they have this back-to-back. They won at Indiana. Whether Indiana's good or bad, that's a win against a Big Ten team on the road. That is impressive. Then they win at Notre Dame. Again, impressive. They beat Temple, the aforementioned UCF, at Navy, and then, whoever else is in the conference. But that back-to-back of Indiana, Notre Dame, not saying that's enough, but I think those two wins out of conference are better than any two wins someone else may have out of conference.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'm just looking to see if Houston has played anyone legitimate. Actually, here's the thing about Houston. They lost opening week to Texas Tech, and they've won 11 in a row. So this should be a fun game.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, because I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so I didn't know that until I just saw it. So I'll say this. I'm gonna roll with Cincinnati because I'm going to root very hard for Cincinnati. It's nothing against Houston. It's time Cinderella crashes the ball in the college football playoff.
Right, definitely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'll go with Cincinnati too.
Yeah. Now, if you're going to gamble the points, I might take Houston because I think that 10.5 is a little large, but that's a whole nother conversation. All right. Do you want to go to the SEC title game, or do you want to do the Big Ten?
Let's build up. Let's go to Big Ten next, and then we'll build up.
All right, let's keep going. Big Ten title game. Iowa versus the Fighting Jim Harbaughs. And for the first time in his Michigan career, Jim Harbaugh beat Ohio State last week. This is going to be black and blue football as opposed to what Cincinnati Houston might look like.
Yeah.
This is going to be physical, all about running the football. You got number 2 Michigan, number 13 Iowa in the Big Ten title game. I think this game comes down to, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, the quarterback play. Because if you look at the numbers, Iowa's number 14 in the nation in run defense, Michigan 22nd. Both teams like to run the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Michigan 20th and third down defense, Iowa 79th. Iowa 103rd on third down conversions, Michigan's 10th. Both teams are high in turnover margin. Iowa third, Michigan 28th. And scoring defense, they're 8 and 9 respectively. Michigan gives up 17.717 points per game. Iowa 17.25. I don't want to say the pressure is all off Jim Harbaugh after he beat Ohio State.
I think actually more pressure's on him this week.
That's what I wanted to say. You went there. It's college football playoff time, Jim Harbaugh. You have to win this game.
Yeah.
And the way Michigan's been playing, it wouldn't shock me at all if they won this game. But they've got it. There was the one play last week that really just stuck with me. And they were up 7-0 at the time. They were driving down the field and they were going to take a lead, and McNamara throws the pick and Ohio State comes back down. They tie the game at 7. I'm not saying that's a bad it's a bad play because you turn the ball over. That can't happen tonight. You have to be good if you're Cade McNamara and Michigan. All right.
Yeah, this is huge. I really think the pressure's on, and like, last week with Ohio State, that just felt like one of those like now and never. Like if you're ever gonna beat them, like do it now. Like they're somewhat vulnerable. Michigan is having the best team in Harbaugh's run so far, and just win this game. You're in the playoffs. Just win. But I'm fascinated,
baby.
I really am fascinated to see how they match up in the playoffs, though. They're one of these teams who are like, right now they would probably play Cincinnati if both win.
They're 2, Cincinnati's 4. So I would imagine Cincinnati's moving up to 3, unless Oklahoma State blows Baylor out of the water and they jump to 3.
Yeah, I guess I'm just assuming if Bama loses, Cincy wins. Obviously, one of the two out of Georgia and Bama have to lose. So,
and I think everyone is in agreement. Even if Georgia loses, they're still getting it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing on Michigan. They have 2 of the best pass rushers in the country. Aiden Hutchinson, who's probably played himself into a top 5 NFL draft pick, and Ojabo, who's had a heck of a year as well. If they could get pressure and get Michigan, whether it's turnover, sacks, whatever they could do, Michigan's defense is good enough to win them this game. The offense has to be on par also. But it has to be through the air. So it has to be Mike Sanistrill, Eric All, guys like that who have to help, because I brought up Iowa is 14th in the nation in stopping the run. You're going to load up against Harbaugh, and sorry, Hassan Haskins, I just don't see you having 5 touchdowns again today like you did last week against Ohio State.
Poor Dwayne, his brother.
His career went down the Dwayne. Steeler legend Dwayne Haskins.
Maybe that's that for Iowa, right?
What?
His brother basically wears an Iowa jersey.
Basically.
Conspiracy.
This will be physical. This should be different kind of entertainment. And this is realistically, this game's right up Jim Harbaugh's alley.
Mm-hmm.
This is how he wants Michigan to play. And if they play like this, they'll win this game. It's not that I want to diminish anything Iowa's done. I just think Michigan's a better team. They got the better players. on the outside. And Harbaugh, I'm begging you. I hate it when you go to the Wildcat quarterback because all you do is run the ball with him. Limit it tonight. Limit it. You need the game. Don't outthink this, Jim Harbaugh. Oh, man. You like Michigan also?
Yeah, I'm going with Michigan. It's just they just seem like the hotter hand right this minute for just after last week. I'm not going to pick against them like you said.
Yeah, I have a hard time after last week picking against Michigan. Should be a fun game. I think that is the 8:00 game that'll be on Fox. All right. Time for the main event. And this will be fun. We got Alabama, we got Georgia, SEC title game. All the pressure in the world is on Nick Saban. Win, and they're probably in the playoff. Lose, I don't know where Alabama goes.
Unless a bunch of other people lose. A bunch of, and unless there's still that argument outstanding. But after with 2 losses, then I don't think you have that argument anymore.
So hold on, let's take that hypothetical for a second. So argument's sake, if Georgia wins, so this is a hypothetical. If Georgia wins, Michigan wins, Cincinnati loses. So now all of a sudden there's 2 spots open up. Or maybe one. If Baylor, let's say Baylor beats Oklahoma State. So we would assume one of those spots goes to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So then we're looking at 2-loss Alabama, 2-loss Ohio State, potentially, and 2-loss Oklahoma State. And for, giggles and stuff, 2-loss Oklahoma's right in there also.
Yeah.
We would guess it'd be one of those 4 teams.
Well, I think then you're talking Alabama again.
Right, but that's the point of this is, of those 4, who do you put in? And I don't know if you're going to put Oklahoma in right now with all the uncertainty of what's going on because of Lincoln Riley bolting for USC.
I don't know.
I don't know if you're going to put Oklahoma State in, depending on how they play today.
But that's the argument. That's 100% the argument for Notre Dame. It's just like you got all these 2-loss teams in that scenario. I mean, obviously one of them would be Oklahoma State, but you would have all these 2-loss teams, and then you still have this 1-loss team.
Well, I'm saying if Georgia and Michigan wins and Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, they lose, Notre Dame's probably getting in.
Yeah.
So it just depends on who's that last spot going to.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's out, I'll tell you this. If I'm Georgia and if Georgia wins this game today, and there'll be 1 for sure, and Alabama winds up being 4, I would be so pissed off because we just beat them. Why do we have to beat them again?
Yeah. Yeah, that's 100%.
It
happens.
That would anger me if I'm Georgia.
Wasn't it like last year that happened with Wisconsin, where it was like they had this bloodbath game against Ohio State, and then like the following week they had to play them in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I think
something like that.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago. Yeah, they beat Ohio State, and then they had to play them again. Now this could be all forgotten if Georgia wins and everyone else takes care of their own business, but it's just a fun hypothetical to go down. I think everyone in America can agree the best offense, defense, special teams in the whole country is the Georgia defense.
Yeah, they are just awesome.
They're fast. They're very, they're just so good everywhere. There's not a real hole on it. Just to show you there's not a real hole on it, they're first in total defense, yards per play, scoring defense, and passing efficiency. Probably other stuff, but that's all I could fit out on the lines. They are so good. Jordan Davis, Dean, the linebacker, they're good in the secondary. And Kirby Smart, we said about Harbaugh last week being Ohio State, it was now or never. Kirby Smart, you're 0-3 against Nick Saban. If you're ever going to beat Saban, this is the year to do it.
Yeah, knock him out of the freaking playoffs. Like then you don't have to play him, like we're saying. Like this
you win this game, Kirby Smart, and you will not look like Kirby from Super Smash Brothers anymore. So, just some other numbers. Alabama is 7th in the country in total offense. They're 2nd in third down conversion. Georgia's 14th in third down conversion defense. I mean, they're 3rd and 4th in rushing defense. Alabama's 5th in points per game. Georgia's 6th. These are realistically two very even teams who have not seen each other recently. I think their last meeting was the SEC title game 2 years ago because it was Florida last year with that legend Kyle Trask.
Oh yeah.
Amen. If Alabama wants to win this game, they're gonna have to have a great defensive performance, but they're also gonna have to. They're gonna load up, stop the run, and they're gonna have to dare Stetson Bennett, the Georgia quarterback, to beat him. And that is probably the weakest spot of Georgia, might be Stetson Bennett, but he's played really well. So take with that what you will, but this will be his toughest test. This is Georgia's toughest test. And this is really this is going to be a fun heavyweight fight. All right. Do you like Georgia? Do you like Bama?
Pick Georgia, but I think this is the closest out of any of the games we talked about for sure. Between, point spread and who I would pick to win.
Yeah, so. The line is 6.5, and that is the lowest of the games we've discussed. I mean, I want to pick Georgia. I'm not a Nick Saban fan. I will never be a Nick Saban fan. I do respect him. I'm taking Alabama because I know in a big game I should never bet against Nick Saban. It's almost like betting against Belichick in a big game. You don't do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to root for Georgia, but I'm going to my heart wants to go Georgia. My brain's telling me Alabama. I don't know why I'm relying on my brain. I've never done it in my 28 years of living, but I'm doing it now. I'm going to take Bama. It's going to be close. This has 24-17, something like that written all over it.
Yeah.
24-20. Give me Bama. Should be a fun day of football. So we both like Michigan. We both like Oklahoma State. We both like Cincinnati. You like Georgia. I like Bama. We're going to find out the rest of the college football playoff. We're going to find out the field, I think tomorrow they're going to announce it.
So what's your final four that you're putting in basically?
Okay, so Georgia's going to get in, win or lose. Michigan's going to win, so they're in. Alabama's going to win, they're in. If Cincinnati wins, Cincinnati's going to stay. Cincinnati loses, we're going to have that Oklahoma State versus Notre Dame conversation if Oklahoma State wins.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly. So in my world, Bama loses, and then it's Oklahoma State and Notre Dame.
If Cincinnati were to lose.
Is it? Wait, hang on. No, I'm thinking who would be the fourth spot in my scenario with Bama losing?
Okay, so you have Bama losing. So you have Michigan winning.
I think, yeah. So then I think Notre Dame has to go into the fourth.
So Cincinnati, Notre Dame. That's fine, and that's the conversation we're gonna have to wait to listen to on tomorrow. I think they're announcing it once again, but we can totally talk college football playoff when we record next week. It's going to be interesting to see how these games unfold. I think the only thing we know for sure is win or lose, Georgia's in. Yep. They are the only team, I think, who has set their mark. They're going to go to the playoff.
Right.
Everyone else is fighting for 3 spots. You better impress the committee. Otherwise, Santa Claus, who would be the NCAA in this position, they're going to leave you cold for Christmas, man.
Wow.
You look like Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone doing this face.
Only Stetson gets presents.
Only Stetson gets presents. Oh, man. All right. So this has been the Wishbone ShotGun podcast live stream on the Sports Insanity Network. We'll break down what the college football playoff looks like next week. Enjoy the conference championship games today, everyone. For Adam Reeder, I'm Mike Rifkin. Enjoy your Saturday. Enjoy